Hey, good people. Sammy Ashe here, Executive Director of the Ashe Academy, and your host of our Inspire, Uplift, Engage podcast. You have so many options out there, and we appreciate you tuning in each week to check out our various conversations. Reminder, we've got a few things going on during our back to school town hall season that will be linked in the description box, but here's a quick rundown. Our Adopt a Classroom nominations form. Put your favorite teacher in the running to win $300 in classroom essentials. We have an Adopt a Classroom fundraiser, so we would love to donate to 10 classrooms across the nation. And last but not least, we have a fundraiser for our supply drive coming in August, where we'll be giving supplies directly to the community in Southern California. We appreciate all the support of individuals and small businesses. Plus, if you know a corporate sponsor who'd like to partner with us, send them our way. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Ashe Academy's Inspire, Uplift, Engage podcast. I am Sammy Ashe, the Executive Director and your host of your favorite show. Today, we are joined by Joseph Fung. He is a five-time tech founder with multiple successful exits and speaks frequently on diversity and corporate social responsibility. As the CEO of Uvaro, he is on a mission to help the world's professionals lead more fulfilling careers from their first job to their last. Joseph is also an active angel investor who ensures that the majority of his investments are into women-led companies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sammy. This is going to be a fun discussion.
Absolutely. So let's take it back to the very beginning for you, because you've had these beautiful you're definitely a multi hyphenate, but just multi tech founder. So where is your journey? Where does your journey begin getting into tech?
Oh my goodness, it's like so many people. You have to look at the upbringing. I've been very lucky in that my parents are very entrepreneurial, and I think they set a really good example of how do you build up kind of like value or businesses, and how do you accomplish a lot with very little. And so I think they charted an amazing path for me. What got me into tech, in all honesty, was happenstance. In high school, I was supposed to go into business. That's what I had in my electives. That's what I was going into. And yeah, I guess I was a bit of a jerk in high school. I went into that first class and I looked at the class and I was like, the classmates who have in this class, I'm probably not going to get the most value out of. And so I left and I wanted to switch classes, and the only thing available was computers. And so I got
Wait,
into tech.
you
Yeah.
literally walk in and say, nope.
Yeah. I raised my hand to take the attendance. I dropped off the attendance. I went to the guidance office. I was like, I want a different class. Uh, and I mean, I
Wow.
was in that high school. I was that kid. I was like small for my age. I had probably smarter mouth on me than I should have. And so I always struggled with those dynamics. And I was like, this class is just going to make my life a nightmare. And so I was like, I want out. And the only thing available was computers. So yeah, that's what got me into it.
Wow. So what was it about computers that stuck? Because you can easily just take a class and you're like, okay, like I got my grade and then never pick that up again. What was it
Totally.
that kept you in there?
Yeah. The big thing was uh, when you're writing a program and you're creating something, if it doesn't work, it's you. Like,
Mm,
there's no outside factors. It's not like, I mean, if you're doing something in biology, there's so many things that could go wrong. If you're working on an English assignment, it could be, the English teacher that happens to love that author and has a very different opinion. Like, there's just so many factors. Whereas with computers, I think what pulled me into it was, well, if your program works, if it's correct, it works, and if it doesn't, it was something you did. And so the responsibility, the control was all on your shoulders. You didn't have to worry about what the student beside you was doing or what they thought about your work. And so feeling like my fate was in my hands is what really pulled me to it.
I mean, I have dabbled in tech, but I am an artist at heart and we have to workshop all of our work. So that's a beautiful thing where you're like, this is all on me.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's still all on you as the artist, but still like you're like, this is what I created. Take it or leave it. If it's working,
totally.
it's because of me. If it's not, I'm still working on it. I'm still coding. We're still figuring out some bits and pieces, but yeah,
it's the same thing. I make music on the side, and I was always very so the visual arts was always kind of my cup of tea. Like that's where I felt most at home. Um, I think what I really liked about the programming, the technical side, is that there was this clear kind of finish point. It's like the program was done. The assignment was done, and it's like sure, like if you're sketching something or you're painting something or you're crafting a piece of music, you just want to keep working at it and you add more to it and more layers. And whereas when I was programming, it's like, hey, I'm done and it's correct and I know I can do the next thing. And it's a different beast. It uses a lot of the same creativity, but the knowing if you've succeeded or not is a little clearer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's super important. The creativity part, something I had to learn along the way. Like, oh, if we're all creating something that requires that same muscle, you have to imagine something and then create
Mm-hmm.
it. So it's not very different, which is why the organization touches on both the arts and STEM, because there's so many crossover avenues, especially jobs wise, where you're doing tech things in an arts space or you're
Mm-hmm.
doing an artistic things in the tech space. So a whole bunch of dualities there. So you mentioned your family, but did you have any, or as like support system getting you into tech, but did you have any professors or mentors along the way, and what did that look like, if so?
Yeah, for me, I found um, my mentorship in my secure communities on the internet. So quite the opposite. My
Interesting.
professors, I'd say, were uh, if you think about there's things that hold you back and things that push you forward. I'd say the academic institution and my professors, held me back.
Mm,
Not through any fault of their own, but I studied computer engineering uh, for all the wrong reasons. It was the hardest program to get into, so I was like, I want that. Because it's so competitive. Your success, your marks throughout the program matter a lot because that's how employers will rate you. They always want the top students. To keep it an even playing field, the school I went to doesn't allow part-time studies. If you're
mm,
studying engineering there, you have to have a full-time course load. And because there's so much prestige at the university, all the professors all had these very strong comments about no, school isn't a part time thing. It isn't a thing on the side. You've got to take it really seriously. And I was so entrepreneurial. I was always running something on the side. And so it took me 8 years to finish my undergraduate degree because I was so busy doing other things. And the school slowed me down, but I found a lot of people online where we were programming, working on open source projects who really just wanted to make something awesome that people would use. And that's where I really found, the fuel that propelled me forward. And so, yeah, it was interesting. I did find that support network, but it was all anonymous strangers online. And when we went to finally meet, it was terrifying because it was at that time where people were like, you don't meet people on the internet. And yeah, it was
cut to
scary, but
cut
it
to
was
now.
good.
That's all we do.
I know.
I mean, look at us right now.
Totally.
Oh wow. Something you said about like the professors does resonate with me. Not about holding me back, but there's like a very weird relationship between like 20-year-old Sammy in college and like graduating and not wanting to talk to those professors anymore, or
Yeah.
like finding it weird, like adding them on social media was just weird for me back then. And this is 10 years ago. So I'm just like, why did you do that? You like completely took any opportunity for someone to guide you in your career as you were moving forward out of the equation because it was just weird to talk to them. But like we are how we are, and
The,
it's
the challenge is, I mean, people get into this industry. They get to be a teacher or a professor or an instructor because they want to make a difference and they want to help people.
mhm,
Heart's absolutely in the right place. So, and it is a tough job. I cannot imagine doing it. I would, so huge kudos to them. But I think there's a real challenge where their lived experience is not ours.
mhm,
Like it's so opposite. I mean, someone who works in academia, their average tenure is 10, 12 years. And I mean, the stats, I'll back that up, but the average Canadian and American, their average tenure in a job is 3.8. Like it's totally different experience. Like your students, like me, on average, we're gonna have 16 different jobs. Like it's a totally different perception. And you lose track. Like there's this great study that came out surveying trustees at colleges, And one of the questions was, are your grads job ready? And only 6% of those college trustees thought their grads were job ready. And and if we just think about this idea of, well, we've got an academic institution whose internal DNA is assuming that people come out and they're not yet ready, like there's still something else they have to do before they're quote job ready.
Mhm.
That means they're just prepping people for a very different life experience than people who graduate, because people are graduating, they've got 40K debt. 3 out of 4 graduates take a job in a different direction just to make sure they're paying their debts. Like, so their lived experience day to day is so different than instructors and professors and academics. It's no surprise that we don't gravitate to them for advice, because they just aren't seeing what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Touch and agree on that.
It's so hard. It's like it's a diversity of
Mhm.
experience, and
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll all see this with coworkers, with family, with things. It's just people have different lived experiences, so they can share with us only what they know.
Absolutely. I mean, I have always had a side project, just like you mentioned, like it took you a long time to finish school because you're like,
Mhm.
well, if this is full time, I still have my other thing going on that cannot not happen. I don't know why I don't know how to not just like sit down. Like anytime there's like a holiday, it's supposed to be like, oh, relax. I'm like, oh yeah, I can relax. And then I find some project in addition to the other projects I have going on.
But I bet you feel
Um,
great, right? You feel great doing that.
I I don't like the feeling of doing nothing.
Yeah.
I cannot sit still and be like, okay, I'm just going to rest the whole time. And I'm a Taurus, and like that's our thing, like rest and sleeping in. Like, but I have another project that has to get done.
I I feel like the biggest distraction that people had was the idea that work life balance is like work rest balance. And it's like no,
mm,
no, it's like it should be the thing you have to do to make sure that you're putting food on the table, and the thing you have to do because you feel compelled. And yeah, totally empathize. It's like keeping yourself busy. That's good.
beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so speaking of feeling compelled, what was that first tech company that you started of the five that you had going, and why did you start it?
So the first one that we started, I look back now and just like a ton of bad decisions. Not terrible. I learned a lot, but it definitely wasn't the most efficient path. Um, if you've ever been on a website where you see like a discussion forum, people make a post, people reply, and you have all of this kind of interaction. Um, our first project was building software to let people do that on their own sites. So discussion forum software. And we did it because we all wanted to run discussion forums on our site and there was nothing free. So we started building software that others could use, and we had hundreds of thousands of websites using the software. So cool. But we didn't think about how we would, that's not the right way to phrase it. Uh, we thought about how we would turn it into a money making venture at the beginning, but we didn't bake that in from the get go. We just focused on get people to use it, make sure it's free, get out as many as possible. And by the time we started to say, okay, it's costing money, like we have to host it, we have to, pay for domain names and all this stuff. Um, as we started to try and turn on some of the paid features or sponsorship or things like that, the community struggled a lot with that because the message so much was like free, liberating, accessible, but that created a strong sense of there should never be any money exchanging hands, and it was really hard to turn it into a um, not even just profitable, but covering its own costs
Yeah.
entity. So we ended up spinning it out into its own not-for-profit entity. So it's all volunteer run. It's all maintained. It's still running now, but there's not enough money in the system there to pay for staff and full-time development. So it's all run and still coordinated by volunteers.
I love a good spin on something though, like especially when like something has a purpose and
Mm-hmm.
you can't like force it to work in the way that okay, like everything has to make money, like everything has
Yeah,
to function that way. I'm glad that it didn't just get like removed from existence and it's now like okay, it's a
totally. And man,
nonprofit.
that was a huge scary thing because it's like we're trying to figure out, should this be a business, should this not? And so of course a lot of the volunteers in the project are, they're skeptical and they're hesitant and like, these people who want to make it a business, what are their goals in the right direction? We're like, no, they are. We're gonna get together, we're gonna turn this into a not for profit. we got to sign paperwork, which means we got to get together. So a bunch of us flew into Scottsdale, Arizona, and we all met up. And of course, everyone's got this like, crap, I'm meeting people from the internet feeling. And we don't know what each other looks like or how tall they are or how old they are. It was both terrifying and beautiful all at the same time.
Now, do you have the same perspective as me? I am like 10 out of 10 in person. Like, I would definitely recommend seeing me in real life. Or are you'd prefer a virtual meeting?
Let me think the right. I always get so much value out of in person. I love it. Like it's so valuable. But I've also grown to appreciate that we can accomplish more if we don't let that be a blocker. So I usually end up falling somewhere on both. It's like, let's make sure we're building that rapport, we're building that relationship. But if we can actually keep things rolling virtually, we'll accomplish a lot more too. So I'm always so conflicted. But I love it. I just came back from a fantastic walk and talk meeting. I've had a head of marketing. He's been with us since February, and this was the first time we met in person. And my goodness, it
Awesome.
was so good. It was so good.
And you're like, okay, we can keep the rest of the meetings in virtual. I was glad to see you in person, but we can
Oh no, it's good. We got to do a high five. He's gonna come over tonight. We're gonna have drinks. It's gonna
Oh,
be
perfect.
amazing.
All
It's
right,
so
keep it
good.
going. Keep it
Yes.
going. Now, so from the very first one to along the way, did it get more or easier along the way, or is everything like a very unique child and it doesn't exactly get easier? It's different each way. Like, how would you describe each company that you're?
Totally. So the big thing is, I relish the process of building a company. And I always need to kind of hold a mirror to myself to think about that because I really enjoy that. Like I love building a great company where people do great work. Uh, Other people really fall in love with a problem and they fall in love with a space and they want to run that company for a long period of time and things get kind of more efficient, more systematic. I share that. I share that because every time I've run a company, and I'm on my sixth now, uh, the things I did before get easier, but your own expectations get higher. So you move the bar, you move the goalposts. And so, no, it hasn't actually gotten easier. I'm having just as many sleepless nights, just as much stress, um, but we make bigger bets. We go further, we go faster. Um, and to give you a couple of examples, like uh, part of building a company is your marketing, right? It's like how do we market? And I remember the first time we were building an inbound marketing. Like we want people to find us using search, things like that. We're like, okay, how do we write a blog post every week? And like we thought we were really ambitious. Like how do we do two, maybe three a week? How do we push ourselves to do that? Uh, and we figured out a ton of ways to do that very cost efficiently. A lot of outsourced writers. With this company, we're like, how do we do this really aggressively? How do we push 5 to 10 articles a week? How do we get hundreds of thousands of pages on our website? And so now we're crawling job boards, we're pulling in employment opportunities and creating new articles to help people find the right, sales manager job or the right sales development job in Atlanta. And we're generating tens of thousands of posts every month now. And so yeah, we're doing a lot more with the same amount of effort. Uh, but I still have the same sleepless nights. We have the same stresses. People problems are still the same thing. So it's like it's just as hard, but you have bigger results.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, not beautiful for the sleepless nights, but you're
If I didn't
accomplishing
enjoy it,
things. You're doing
yeah.
great things. We give you your flowers while we can. Now, from one founder to another, I heard that you have worked with family. So
Hmm.
I do want to have a little moment to talk about working with family. How is that? In what capacity are you working with family?
It's so good. I mentioned like my
I
parents are
love
very
that you start out
entrepreneurial.
that way.
Yeah, it's so good. It is like I mean, I should set the stage. Like my sisters are my best friends. Like we get along so well. I get so much value from them as people, as intellectuals. They challenge me. I'm a better person for getting a chance to work with them and get to know them. Uh, it's not without its challenges. Um, the I think the part that's really interesting is we all really recognize that you can't take this for granted. Like, a lot of people work with family and it doesn't go well. That's why people say things like, don't mix family and business. That's why there's a lot of investors who say, no, I don't invest in couples or siblings, because when things go bad, they go bad.
Mm.
Uh, yeah. For us, it's been really good, I think, because we each have different skill sets. So I studied computer engineering. My co-founder, the youngest sister, she studied archaeology and anthropology, like really engineering and arts. And the amazing part of it is, as we think about the impact we have on people, uh, I can see her very people oriented, that anthropological perspective, carrying so much value. I'm thinking, like, how do we build the software and the engine that makes all this thing happen? And she's like, got to focus on the people. And, how do we make sure this really, really cares? And the middle sibling, she studied a master's of education. She's an entrepreneur. And when I think about what we're doing, we couldn't have planned for better background for this. Um, but it's hard because we speak faster. There's a lot of shortcut, a lot of context, a lot of trust. It's like we have executives and co-founders and people who sit in the meetings, and we've got to make sure that we don't just race through the conversation. Or we'll have a chat on a weekend where we're like, oh, hey, we should do this. Yes, we should do that. That's great. We'll do it on Monday. And we forget that Monday morning meeting, it suddenly feels like a 90-degree angle on something we were doing. And they just weren't there for the weekend while we were sitting there barbecuing. And so we have to be very intentional about it. And we probably don't do as well as we should.
I mean, that's very transparent. Working with my sisters has been challenging but rewarding at the same time. We know what we've been through, so we don't need to share any details. But we are still here, and with it being our namesake, the Ash Academy, it's kind of hard for us to get away from the real like core meaning of why we brought this organization together. So um, it's
It's a
beautiful.
pretty awesome name too. Like I got to hand it to you. Like that sounds
Thank you.
distinguished. Yeah, like the Fung Academy. It just does not have the right ring.
Hey, you know
So,
what? It can. Let's not do that.
so are your siblings? Are your sisters older, younger? What's the
So
dynamic there?
I am the oldest, and I appreciate the questions from the guests. So this season three is a questions on Sammy. I appreciate it. So Tasha is the middle child.
Hmm.
She is the CFO, and Crystal is our COO. She is the youngest, and the dynamics are as interesting as you would place it as the middle child and youngest. But I really do think it's beautiful figuring out where their own paths are. So Tasha being in like business econ, and then Crystal going into public health. Like we bring so many varied
Nice.
things, and then me being the artist turned business person, like there are so many nuances there, but like we get each other. At the end of the day, they have my back, I have theirs, and the trust thing that you mentioned, like that, hilarious that you're like, oh, like over the weekend we figured some things out, and then we come into a meeting and it's like, okay, we're doing X, Y, and Z, everyone. And they're like, well, is this news, or did you guys already meet over the weekend?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
hard. It is. It's really tough. Do you have? So I mentioned, like, I feel so lucky in that we have got some executives, some leaders in our organization who kind of jumped in with eyes wide open. One of our co-founders is a high school friend of mine. He was the best man at my wedding, and so kind of he knows that dynamic. He and I have so much trust. He doesn't feel threatened by that, and he'll call out when we're doing that. And I don't know if we could accomplish it without that dynamic. Do you have that, the same kind of benefit there, or is it the three of you primarily?
so we have a board full of family, friends, and extended like
Nice.
network now, and so they understand if it's like the founders are speaking on something that like we have fleshed it out, and we're good to go, and like they trust us enough to, I won't say roll with it. Like they definitely are veterans in their given industries, be it tech, education, um, mental health. But like they trust that whatever decisions we're bringing to the table, um, are sound. So I do appreciate that. As we grow and as people move in and out and it's less family friends, I do imagine us having to explain our dynamic more so than like people just understanding and knowing. So I'm excited for that because I am big on communication. Every single
Yeah.
type of relationship we have out there is going to require that. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you need to know how to speak to people. Um, and I didn't know how much communication was actually in the tech world until I started interviewing engineers, and I was like, "Oh, your interview process is very communication heavy."
Hmm.
And then working in tech for nearly 3 years, I was like, "Oh, like we talk so much." I thought it was just people are coding, they're just alone in a room, they don't have to talk to anybody. No, someone's pinging you daily, multiple times. Hey, can we get this update? Can we talk
Yeah.
about something? Can we hop on a call? Um, so, yeah, communication is key regardless. Now, speaking of communication, as a speaker, you have spoken on diversity and social
Hmm.
responsibility. Where was your, I guess, passion or what led you to speak on that?
Oh, interesting. What led me to speak? So, volunteerism and philanthropy has always been something that we were raised with. So it's like as from stupid little things like as a kid getting allowance and our parents saying, hey, what are you going to give out of this? Or during the holiday season, my parents would be volunteering with hospice or other organizations, and they drag us along. And originally it was just us there to help them accomplish the commitments that they made. And I mean, as a kid, you don't get it. You're like, you committed to prepping this dinner, why are we doing
I
it?
mean, you said drag, so there's still a
Yeah.
little bit of that. You're like, why did you
Yeah.
drag me to this?
So at the beginning that's what it was, but then as you get exposed to it you realize, no, actually this is how you make the world a better place. And so early on we spent time with hospice and Habitat for Humanity, and I mean the civic responsibility from being a cadet. So that I think was always an important part of our upbringing, kind of giving back. This is how you make the world a better place, and sometimes it's through your work, sometimes it's through your money, sometimes it's through what you do on the side. um, I think what got me speaking about it was uh, not a specific external factor, but actually seeing the dynamic of tech founders. And a lot of technology founders are kind of engineers. It's heavily biased towards engineering, computer science backgrounds. Um, and as a side effect, a lot of introverted people. And one of the things that happens is a lot of tech companies, a lot of them raise external capital. So there are a lot of bootstrapped ones. That's one way to do it. A lot where it's friends and family or bank loans, another. But there's a lot of venture capital. And
Mhm.
what ends up happening is if somebody entrusts you with $1 million or $5 million, you suddenly feel this huge obligation of stewarding that money. And as a result, I was seeing a lot of tech founders, a lot of CEOs uh, internalizing this sense that they shouldn't tell people what to do with their money. That they're stewards of other people's money, and you know we shouldn't be judging the people around us for how they choose to use their money. And so there's this extreme silence, and even if they were choosing to donate on the side or choosing to support something, this very very strong sense that we shouldn't tell people what to do. And uh, in my volunteer work, as I was sitting on boards and we were always raising money, on the flip side I would see these other businesses where the founders and the CEOs were just more out there and vocal. And I mean, you'd see car dealerships cutting a check for 100 grand. You'd see restaurants who say, "Yeah, I believe in this cause." You'd see, manufacturing shops who say, "Yeah, I want a place where my employees can raise their families, so I'm sponsoring the soccer team." And there was this interesting dichotomy of like business owners and leaders who were very comfortable wearing their heart on their sleeves, and in the tech community, a lack of it. And I came to realize a lot of it is driven by the sources of capital. And I realized, hey, if we actually want to make the world a better place, we need to be comfortable giving people permission to wear their heart on their sleeves, to say we should give, say we should, contribute back. And so I started speaking, writing, engaging to try and create a safe place for other leaders to do the same. And that's been really interesting. Watching other founders and executives struggle with that same dilemma, and seeing like, hey, yeah, it's actually okay to take a principled stand. Your investors aren't going to get angry. They're not going to get upset. Yes, they gave you $1 million, $5 million to work with, and yes, you can donate some of that because that makes your company and your people better. Uh, it's been an interesting journey watching that.
Interesting, interesting. Um, Now, speaking of diversity, in the tech world, do you see a lot of people who look like you, um, either in leadership roles or like what did that look like as you were going through your career? Um, because I
Yeah,
know for myself, going into tech, I am a token black person from community to school to career. So like in all spaces of my life, I am usually one of very few people who look like me. So it has been very interesting talking to people who either had the flip side where like, well, no, I'm well represented, or like people are just like me, like, yeah, I have never seen someone who really fits who I identify as um, in these
it's
spaces.
it's a weird one. It's been very my journey. I felt has been very polarizing. Like it's been very flip flopping. So um, people who are listening in, they can't tell. I'm a mixed race family. So like father's Chinese, my mother's mixed European. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and so growing up, my sisters and I were like mixed race family. The interesting thing is that as a side effect, we felt like we didn't belong anywhere.
Mm,
So there's like a really, really big Chinese community in Toronto. And so we'd go to Chinatown. For the people who know the area, we'd go to Pacific Mall, like Markham and Richmond Hill. And who couldn't understand a word of what was going on. And so I mean, we felt like fish out of water there.
mhm,
But on the flip side, all of our friends, like growing up, like by and large, we mostly had white friends because we were in the suburbs. And I mean, stupid little things like I remember visiting friends' houses and I could use chopsticks really well, but the knife and fork and like eating spaghetti was a mess. I mean, I loved it, but it was a disaster. It was always so weird. I felt like I like ham fisted trying to eat at the dinner table. Like, can you just give me two sticks?
oh my god.
So it's like growing up, we always felt like we didn't belong, and even at high school, I mean, in my grade, in my year, there was two of us. There was me and a Japanese kid, and people would ask if we were siblings. Like, no, we don't look at all alike. But then on the flip side, the university that I went to, huge East Asian community, really really big. But as a side effect, I mean, there was a huge community where they would just speak Chinese or they would speak Vietnamese because there was such a concentration, and I definitely didn't belong there. Uh, so, in many regards, um, and my sisters, we talk about this sometimes. We have a lot of similar experiences. We didn't ever really feel like there was a community that we belonged part of, and so it always felt like we had to blaze our own trail. Um, and the interesting side effect of being mixed is that in some circumstances you pass as well. So, like, I spent some time in China teaching English, and some people would look at me and they're like, "Oh, you're foreign," and other people would look at me and be like, "Oh no, you're Chinese," and they'd carry those biases into the conversation, and that was
Mm,
really interesting. And now running a tech company as a CEO, I feel like I actually benefit from both sides. I speak, I carry myself, I communicate uh, in the way that a lot of people in the tech and the VC community expect. And so it's a very comfortable experience. But at the same time, the Asian background is not hidden. And I know that there's people because they say so, they assume I'm good at computers or I'm good at math. And we've got really good technical product because I studied engineering and I clearly got an Asian background and I probably had really high marks and stuff like that. And so it's really interesting. I wouldn't say we've seen a lot of people who look like us who have that exact same experience. Like very rarely will we bump into somebody in the ecosystem where they've got that same mixed heritage experience, and so we can't identify with those. Um, there's not a lot of people that we can identify with in that way, but because we have the mixed heritage, we can find enough commonality that it lets us kind of slide into and network into so many conversations. Like I mentioned there, like we volunteer with Habitat for Humanity, with hospice. Um, First generation immigrants from China or Hong Kong generally aren't working with those not-for-profit organizations. And so we can have those conversations. On the flip side, like, yeah, we have a lot of fun celebrating Chinese New Year. We spent a lot of time in Hong Kong. We spent a lot of time overseas. And so we can have those conversations. So it's weird. You kind of get this. odd chameleon experience where you can kind of participate in each community, but you don't necessarily feel like you fully belong in either.
I mean, there are a lot of I guess issues with belonging for everyone. So that's something that I definitely would like to help people with, especially students who, whether they're a token, whether they're mixed, biracial, being able to blaze your own trail, as you will, as you said, um, to like, okay, let's figure out some community for you, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of how you're feeling within whatever communities that you do come from. So,
I love that. We talk a lot about how do you find your tribe, and how do you find that community, and for us, like my sisters and I, it always we never really had that option to find it in our kind of ethnic community or cultural community, and
mm,
so it was always our communities of interest. So, like for me, I'm really big into electronic music as well as circus arts, and that's where I find my community and my tribe. And yeah, that's kind of cross racial boundaries, and so that keeps things interesting.
I'm hearing and I'm seeing very big lights and a big show. I'm not sure if that's the
All of it.
okay,
Yes.
all right. That is a stress reliever in and of itself, so I want more of that in
Totally.
your life. Now, speaking of these exits that you were talking about, I feel like this is super important for people to understand. If I understand your idea of successful exits, can you explain what that means? And then I'll see if that's what I think you mean about that, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, at its core, like as a founder and entrepreneur, as an investor, if we talk about an exit, it's really the kind of nuts and bolts of it are: did the investors get to pull their money out of the business? Is kind of
Mm,
the real measure. Because when you invest in a business, the company uses that money. It's not like it just sits in a bank account. And so something has to happen in order for you to eventually get your money out. And if you're an investor, hopefully it's bigger than when you put it in.
yeah.
Yeah. So that might be that the company is sold. It might be that they raise money from other investors who buy your shares instead of just putting the money into the company. It might be that it goes public. All of those would qualify. Like, can investors eventually get their money out? Um, for me, in terms of my businesses, the exit events have always been selling the company to another company, by and large, and that's what gives the investors the opportunity to take their money out. I've had situations where we've sold the company and I've been completely out, like hands off. So you take it, you run with it. I'm here if you have questions. And I have situations where I've stayed on. So most recently, we sold our software company to a bigger software company, and then I stayed on for 3.5 years, kind of building it even further with them. Uh, yes, investors got to take their money out. I didn't leave for 3.5 years because I still had work I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Um, but in each of those were big successes. Like investors generated a return, people kept their jobs and flourished, and we built something even greater. And those are the things that I look for when I think about success. Did we leave the company, the community better off than when we found it? And those feel really good because you can look back and when they're still running and they're still there, you're like, hey, I did that, and now it's a thing. That's cool.
Okay, that was slightly different from what I was thinking, but still one and the same.
What were you thinking? I want to hear
So, well, just
it.
you leaving the company, so like having your own personal exit strategy. So in some ways, you did end up leaving said company.
Mm,
It got sold. You left after 3 years, or you were completely hands off when it got sold. But I feel like, and I'm not going to speak for any of people of color communities or my own community, but I feel like when we create things, we think we have to, like the longevity part, like especially a corporation. So it's like
mhm.
this is a forever thing, and when I sell, or like any of our like people from our community sell their companies, especially if it's something real close to our hearts, when they sell, they're like, oh, like, why did you sell this thing away? When it's the intention that because I too have an investment in this company that I
Yep.
created, and my return is this company eventually does get sold so that I can make a bigger
Hmm.
profit onto my personal worth. Let's just say that. But I don't know if everyone has that mentality, so then they don't like appreciate the fact that someone from our community creates this big thing, this great thing that means something to everyone, and they end up selling it. So what has been did was it a journey for you to get to the point where you're like, okay, there is an exit strategy to this. There is a point to me potentially leaving the company. Um, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because uh, both because I'm not approaching any kind of retirement age, so I'm not looking at, hey, do I need a succession plan? Um, I don't have any major health concerns, so I'm not worried about that type of succession planning. So mostly, I need to think about that from the perspective of what if something goes south? Like what if something goes wrong? Can my co-founders, my executives, keep the ship running? Um, so I'm really lucky in that I don't have to give that side of things a lot of thought. So really, I get to think about it from the perspective of how do we accomplish our vision the best? How do we reach the most people? And when I've chosen to sell my businesses, it's always been because I realized uh, we can accomplish more with someone else than just doing it on our own. And when you have that kind of clear conviction, it makes it a lot easier to have those conversations. And I remember when we sold the last company, we had some really, really cool software. We had some raving fans and our customers. And like, is this a good thing? What's going to happen to us? Now that we've got this software, like why, what made you sell it? And being able to have a really honest conversation about like, hey, we can accomplish that vision more with this acquisition, with selling the company,
Hmm.
and having a strong sense of conviction made it a lot easier, to kind of, put that out there. And, maybe sometimes, that conviction comes from a place of like, hey, candidly, I'm exhausted. And to have somebody who's going to take care of you in the right
Come on,
way, we
Joseph.
need
Now
someone else too.
you
And
just
there's
became a
lots of ways.
pastor in that moment. I'm exhausted is the song of the decade. My
And
goodness.
if people come and they ask like, hey, why'd you sell? And if you can come back to them honestly about the reasons, and hopefully as a founder, you're doing it because you believe the customers and the community will be better off. Uh, you can let them know their hot take, and people will respond in kind.
Beautiful. Now, do you have any like go-to tips for future entrepreneurs? Like if someone asks you, "Hey, how do I become you?" And I always tell people, please don't try to become me. Like, please don't be
Yeah.
the next you. Be the next you. But like when someone wants to get into entrepreneurship, what is your like go-to like tip for them?
It's hard because there's so many things like, and I'm sure you see it. To kind of
Yeah.
build what you're building, you got to wear so many hats. Um, if I had to pick one thing, um, the one thing. So, and this is good because I think it'll help anybody in any role, but more so entrepreneurs. Is that touchstone that feedback is a gift? Any feedback, positive, negative, constructive, every piece of information you have is a gift. And like any kind of gift, you got to treat that with respect, with gratitude. You got to think about how you're going to pull that in. And I think the real challenge with entrepreneurs is that for us to encourage people to follow us as employees, as customers, as investors, we have to get them excited about a vision. And if you drink the Kool-Aid too much and you think you're already there, when you're charting a vision, if you think you're already there, you stop listening to that feedback, and
Mhm.
that's where you can drop the ball. Kind of stay humble. Keep in mind, every piece of feedback is a gift.
Perfect, perfect. All right. So aside from all the great work that you're doing, what brings you joy?
Honestly, getting to chat with our customers, and I say that, and as the words come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, Joseph, you're a walking entrepreneurial cliche. It's terrible, but uh, all of my businesses have been business to business software. It's like, yeah, I mentioned discussion forums. I was like, how do you run a website better so you can engage your audience and get better conversion rates? Okay, great. We did HR software. How do you retain your people? How do you keep them engaged? And those are profound things, but success is measured by a business metric for some enterprise somewhere. Uh, and being a technologist, that was always enough for me. But now with Uvaro, getting a chance to help people launch these amazing careers in tech, and they're having these life-changing moments. And every week we have somebody else on the phone who's crying because of the positive impact we've had, and they tell us you've saved my life or you've changed the way I see myself. Like every time I chat with a customer, I get to hear that kind of stuff, and wow, that fills my cup, like in ways I never could have anticipated. And uh, I only wish every entrepreneur out there could find customers that they feel so passionate about, because when you find that, it is the most remarkably fulfilling thing ever. It is so good.
Beautiful. This is why I always tell people humanize the user. There's an actual person on the other side of your
Mm-hmm.
software. The end user is a real person, guys. So that's beautiful. Now, you did kind of touch on it earlier, but what does success really mean to you at the end of the day?
Uh, I want to make sure I'm giving you like that really kind of like deep, authentic, not the cliches, because I know a lot of my stuff sounds like a lot of my comments sound like platitudes. Um, you know what? It sounds really silly, but I've had a list of things I want to accomplish in life ever since I was 16. And for me, I feel most successful when I cross something off that list. And really, that list is like, I'd love to live a life that people wanted to write about. It was like an interesting life. It was a life well lived. And so my list has all sorts of dumb stuff on it. Like, yeah, it's got run $1 billion company and take a company public, but it's also got stuff like swing on a chandelier, name a star, wear a bitchin' trench coat in the wind. Like all those things, like knowing that I've been able to make a difference in people's lives, but also have a life that's interesting and fulfilling. And I look back on it and go, yeah, I did a lot of stuff and I had a lot of fun. That feels really successful. And trying to keep both of those in mind, like to me, that's work-life balance. Like, how do you look back at what you've accomplished professionally and look back at what you did with your free time and feeling like you found meaning in that, and you've accomplished everything you wanted to me, that's success.
Beautiful. I feel like you're going to be motivating so many people. Just, swinging from the chandelier sounds not my cup of tea, but someone out there is going to need that for their day. I appreciate
Literally, no, it's like
it.
16-year-old me watching kung fu movies. It's like, oh yeah, it's over the railing, off the chandelier, takes out the bad guys. It's like, you know what? I would love to learn how you do stunts like that. That would be pretty cool. I haven't crossed that one off my list yet, but when I do, I'll let you know, Sammy.
Please do. Okay. This is the perfect time to segue into our final line of questioning for our Q&A. Are you ready for that?
Oh, I'm game.
All right. Now, who is your biggest inspiration?
Again, a cliche. My daughter right now, she is 4 years old and she is so full of personality and attitude. Uh, I only wish I could have a fraction of her character. And so, yeah, she gets me up every morning.
Awesome, awesome. That's a new answer, actually. It's usually the moms. The moms usually take it away, but okay, your daughter, perfect.
She is a sassy, fierce warrior, and she never lets anybody tell her she can't have her own opinion. And I'm like, wow, you know what? There's stuff I can learn from this.
Awesome. Okay, so who do you hope to uplift with your work?
I'd love to uplift anyone that's on that entrepreneurial journey. I we start companies hoping to make the world a better place, and you really can, and it's so good. So hopefully I can add some wind to the sails of other entrepreneurs.
Beautiful, beautiful. And last but not least, well, for this part anyway, how do you stay engaged with your motivation? So what keeps you going?
Carving out space for myself to knock off some of those things on my list. The one I'm working on right now is on my list. It's like have a song that I've written played on the radio. So I'm trying to carve out more time for me to work on my music. So that one day I'll feel brave enough to flip a demo over to a radio station and see if they'll play it. That'll be a journey, but it's hard. Carve out
Well,
that time.
I am a songwriter, so we might have to collaborate on
Oh, there you go.
that. All right, so what's next for you? Do you have any speaking engagements? Do you have any events that you're a part of that we should know about? Let us know.
Yeah, so no immediate like talks or conferences coming up with all of the pandemics. All of those are just starting to get back into shape. So I'm excited for the coming year, but everything's been a hiatus. For us, the big thing is we're hosting a ton. So we are hosting weekly Step into Tech sessions where when people are curious about what's it like working in tech, especially in that kind of revenue, that sales side of things, we run these free regular workshops every week where people can get a sampling of what that looks like. So people are always welcome to join us. And my co-founders and I are getting ready to launch some fun stuff on Green Room. So if anybody's on Spotify and they're on Green Room, look me up, Joseph Fung. There's some fun stuff coming, and I love the interactive audio where people can join in on the conversation. So always happy to connect there.
Perfect. Now, where can people follow you and keep in contact with you? Let us know all the handles and the websites.
Totally. Our website's uvaro.com, uvaro.com. And you can always see our events and our workshops. They're always there. And then on social, I'm on Green Room, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all Joseph Fung, one word, no spaces. I'm one of those guys who's like, hey, it's a new system. I'm going to up there and grab that handle. So yeah, you can grab me at Joseph Fung on just about everything.
Perfect. Well, I so appreciate you joining us. This was a beautiful conversation. We've covered so many layers that this was not just about how to get into tech. This was so much more than that. I'm glad we were able to, humanize that aspect of things because for the people I'm hoping to impact, it's like it's not too hard.
Yeah.
It's not what you build it up to be in your head, that it's just another avenue. It's just another opportunity. So I appreciate you so much. Everyone, this was Joseph Fung, and I want you guys to take care, enjoy yourselves, and have a good one. Thank you.